So the Supreme Court just made a move that Donald Trump's team never saw coming. They refused to intervene, refused to delay, refused to block the unsealing request. And in that single moment, the Trump-Epstein files that had been sealed for years were instantly forced into the light. No warning, no time to prepare, no lifeline thrown to him at all. And for Trump, this isn't just bad news, this is a nightmare. We're talking about an entire collection of documents Trump has fought to keep in the dark: guest lists, internal emails, previously sealed portions of Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition, even FBI materials his team hoped the public would never see. And now they're out. Legally, publicly, irreversibly, because the highest court in the land decided to step aside and let everything spill. A source described the scene at Mar-a-Lago tonight as pure chaos. Trump pacing nonstop, yelling, demanding answers from advisors, while no one can explain how to stop a Supreme Court ruling. This isn't just a bad day for Donald Trump. This is the moment he realizes what I've said many times: Trump isn't afraid of what he can hide. He's afraid of what he can't. And the second the Supreme Court allowed these files to go public, Trump lost the one thing he's always relied on: control of the narrative. Let me tell you what's actually happening and why this is only the beginning. The moment these files were unsealed, the instant the Supreme Court decided not to save Trump anymore, the entire landscape changed. This isn't a few scattered pages or baseless rumors. This is a massive set of records that includes emails, flight schedules, internal communications, and private exchanges between Jeffrey Epstein and several figures who held positions in the Trump administration. Documents that Trump's team tried to delay, tried to block, tried to lock in a box and sink to the bottom of the ocean are now sitting in plain sight for one simple reason: the Supreme Court decided not to stand in the way. And if you think that's all, wait for the next part. Because among the materials released today are portions of Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition that were previously completely sealed. Those depositions don't just describe how Epstein operated, they directly name individuals she said were closely connected to both Epstein and the events on the island. Those sections were kept sealed for years over concerns about political impact, which is exactly what makes them so dangerous for Donald Trump, who repeatedly defended Maxwell in public and called her a terrific person. Then there are the records from the Epstein estate: receipts, personal notes, guest lists, helicopter logs, staff records, financial transactions related to transporting VIP guests. When you put all of these together with the emails and Maxwell's testimony, you get a bigger, clearer, and honestly far more disturbing picture. For Trump, this is actually much worse than the original Epstein files, because those earlier files, as we know, were mostly collected by the FBI and stayed within a system the DOJ could control while he was in office. But the records unsealed today belong to a system Trump no longer controls: independent courts, civil case files, and especially evidence held by third parties like the Epstein estate and victims' attorneys. And most importantly, the Supreme Court was Trump's last hope to stop this release. He believed that with the usual legal arguments, privacy rights, personal security, or political sensitivity, he could delay everything indefinitely. But when the Supreme Court refused to step in, they didn't just deny his request, they told the entire country that this is information the public has a right to see. And once the highest court in the land says that, no loyal lawyer, no political ally, and certainly no Truth Social post can undo the truth. That's why tonight is being called Trump's longest night. Not because the files came out, but because for the first time in years he has no shield left. And this is where the old testimony starts falling into place like puzzle pieces. Because the moment the new files were unsealed, every moment we watched in Congress, the dodging, the deflections, the vague answers, suddenly takes on a completely different meaning. Remember the hearing where Adam Schiff questioned Kash Patel, a moment many people at the time saw as just tense partisan theater. Schiff asked Patel point blank, which Trump cabinet members did Maxwell say were connected to Epstein? Give us the names. And Patel, as many will recall, did one thing he refused to answer. He stammered, claimed he didn't have the transcript in front of him, said the public could read the full testimony, accused Schiff of quoting out of context. At the time, that deflection sounded familiar, like like a typical official trying to avoid a political trap. But tonight, now that we've seen the Supreme Court files, now that internal emails and Epstein's guest lists are out with the names people long suspected, that evasion doesn't look harmless anymore. It looks like a warning sign, a small rock before a landslide. And if you recall, Ghislaine Maxwell testified that multiple members of the Trump administration had ties to Epstein, not just Trump, but a group, when she said that most of the public didn't know what to believe. It was sealed testimony quoted through lawyers from court transcripts never fully released. But now, with the Supreme Court unsealing, the redacted parts of Maxwell's testimony are out with far more specific details about officials, schedules, people brought to the island. Of course, not everything is criminal, but the issue was never just crimes. It was relationships, access, power, and when those details are laid side by side, Maxwell's words are no longer rumor or defense spin. They become verifiable data points, but the story doesn't stop there. Because in the Supreme Court documents, there's also material related to RFK Jr., who has admitted to flying with Epstein multiple times, visiting Epstein's homes, meeting him, but only socially, he said. When that came out before, it was treated more as a personal issue than a political one. But now, when emails and schedules from the Epstein estate match exactly with RFK Jr.'s own statements, and when they also line up with dates Maxwell referred to as having special political guests on the island, the story shifts. It's no longer RFK Jr. knew Epstein. It becomes, what was his role in this larger network? And that's the domino effect I want you to see clearly tonight. Because every time one file is opened, it doesn't just add one new piece of information, it shakes three others loose. You can't release the guest list without re-examining Patel's deflections. You can't read Maxwell's testimony without revisiting the roles of everyone who appears in Epstein's schedules. You can't look at emails between Epstein and political advisors without asking what meetings happened that the public never knew about. Tonight, we're not just watching one file get unsealed, we're watching an old network, a network of power, influence, and silence starting to catch fire again. And like I said, when one file opens, three more start to shake. This is the part where I want you to brace yourself, because what's in these newly unsealed documents isn't just uncomfortable, it's chilling, but in the strict legal sense, not the graphic description sense. I'm not going into any graphic details because the victims deserve absolute respect. What happened on Epstein's island was an organized criminal system targeting underage girls, and part of that system is now laid bare in records the Supreme Court just allowed to see the light of day. That's why tonight is one of the heaviest nights of my career, because we're no longer talking about rumors, media stories, or political speculation. We're talking about sworn depositions, handwritten notes, and investigative summaries attached to federal court filings. And what's in them is part of the truth. This country has waited over a decade to face, in the unsealed documents, the Virgin Islands Attorney General's office describes the pattern Epstein maintained for years, a network of recruiting and trafficking underage girls, bringing them to his private island in St. Thomas, where they were coerced into acts that I will only describe here in their exact legal terms: abuse, coercion, threats, and unlawful detention. Some victims, according to court records, tried to escape by swimming away from the island. I want you to imagine the level of desperation a child would have to feel to make that choice. And according to the files, Epstein and his enablers organized searches, in some cases confiscating victims' passports to prevent them from leaving the territory. Everything I just said is the language of the court, not media exaggeration. These descriptions are in civil and federal records, and tonight, for the first time, they are fully public because the Supreme Court refused to block them. And here's the part that will keep Donald Trump up at night the most: the years Epstein was running this criminal system were the exact years Trump was closest to him. The newly unsealed documents include schedules, guest lists, and logs showing Trump meeting with Epstein during the very same time periods these allegations took place. No, that doesn't mean Trump committed crimes. No, that doesn't substitute for the conclusion of any investigation. But politically, and especially in the eyes of the public, it raises the heavy questions Trump has spent years trying to dodge. How much did he know, and when did he know it? And when you place those questions next to the times Trump publicly praised Ghislaine Maxwell, sent her good luck messages while she was accused of helping Epstein carry out his crimes, the context becomes disturbing in an entirely different way. An American president or former president has never been placed this close to a figure running an organized criminal operation. Portions of documents from the Epstein estate found in the newly unsealed files, show notes referring to VIP guests, private flights, and meetings in Manhattan that line up chronologically with Trump's own public schedule in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Again, that doesn't prove criminality. But it does prove one thing: Trump has fought to avoid the degree of familiarity and the frequency of contact, and that is the key reason these Supreme Court files are more dangerous than any previous release. The facts in them don't stand alone. When combined with Maxwell's testimony, with the newly unsealed emails, with the flight and travel logs, the picture becomes clearer than ever before. Not because it concludes Trump committed crimes, but because it gives the public back the right to look at the truth it was denied for years. Among the records is a passage from the Virgin Islands AG that states Epstein maintained a system designed to bring minors and young women under his control through threats or coercion for his benefit and the benefit of individuals he provided access to. That's legal language, but buried inside it is a haunting question: who was given access? And that question, more than any accusation, is why Donald Trump fears files that are outside his control, because not everything that happened on Epstein's island was documented, but everything that was documented is now being made public. And if your stomach drops a little when you hear these descriptions, that's normal. Because for years, America heard these stories through rumors, through speculation, through angry tweets. But tonight we are hearing the story from federal court records, not from the media, not from political opponents, not from chatter on the street, from the courts. The documents unsealed today aren't just about Epstein, they're about the people who stood next to him. And the moment those documents went public, Donald Trump's reaction unfolded exactly as we've seen for years. Only this time there's one difference: nothing he does can stop them. As soon as the Supreme Court let the files see the light of day, Trump fell back on his most familiar tactic: deflection. Within hours, he fired off a barrage of aggressive statements about the military, suddenly talking about possible military intervention in a country he hadn't even mentioned weeks ago. Then he turned to blaming the media, calling outlets vicious, hostile, attacking him for political reasons, and as always, he tried to change the subject. Immigration, the border, even made up accusations against opponents' families. That playbook used to work. It used to force the press to chase, analyze, debunk, and unintentionally shift the focus away from whatever Trump wanted hidden. But tonight, it's not working, because the public isn't following Trump. The public isn't getting distracted. The public isn't looking away from the Supreme Court files, because they understand this isn't politics anymore. This is federal court. This is a ruling from the highest seat of power. This is the moment the truth kicks the door open, no matter what Trump wants. And what's driving Trump into a panic isn't the documents themselves. It's that he's run out of legal runway. You can attack the press, you can delay paperwork, you can hire one legal team after another to build layer after layer of barriers, but you cannot undo a decision by the Supreme Court. And Trump knows it. Everyone left at Mar-a-Lago knows it. The yelling, the rage, the frantic search tonight for a way to control the narrative, that's the signal he understands. He's losing the one thing he's relied on his entire political career: the ability to bend everything to his will. This time, the story isn't bending. This time, the story isn't following him. This time, the story can't be drowned out by a post or a distraction press conference. The public is looking at the court. The court said these records must be public, and the public is saying, then we're going to read them. This is a position Trump has never wanted to be in, a position where he can't give orders, can't delay, can't threaten, a position where his power no longer works. And when someone who's spent his life controlling the narrative suddenly loses that control, you see real panic. Tonight, we're watching it. Trump no longer controls the story. The story is controlling him. And so I want us to look at the bigger picture. The Supreme Court allowing these files to be unsealed isn't just a legal decision, isn't just a political event, and certainly isn't just a temporary shock for Donald Trump. It is a powerful and necessary reminder that the truth, no matter how long it's been buried, will eventually find its way into the light. This is the first step toward restoring what the Epstein case broke: the public's trust that young victims deserve to be heard, that power comes with accountability, and that the law cannot be bent just because the person named is rich or famous. And if you think tonight is a turning point for Trump, you're absolutely right. He is facing the hardest stretch of his career, not just because of what's in the files, but because he no longer controls the narrative. No more legal shields, no more intermediaries who can block paperwork, no more hope that the public will get tired and look away from the truth. And maybe that's the biggest lesson we take from this moment. When power is used to conceal, it always has a limit. When truth is pushed to the bottom, the pressure only builds until it explodes. And when a system tries to protect the rich and powerful instead of the vulnerable, sooner or later a door appears that cannot be closed. The Supreme Court opened the first door tonight. They didn't say much. They didn't write flowery paragraphs. They simply stepped aside and let the truth walk through. But sometimes that is the most powerful thing a court can do. If today is the day the Supreme Court opened the first door, then the question is no longer when will the second door open, but how long can Trump keep standing when it does? If you found tonight's analysis helpful, please remember to subscribe so you don't miss any critical updates. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.